We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 37a. The Gemara continues a question of Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda to Rav Yehuda. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda says to Rav Yehuda, you said to us in the name of Shmuel that Rabbi Yossi argues Af Barishona, that he argues even in the first Mishnah. Rashi explains Af Barishona, even in the first Mishnah, B'shilaim v'lo ratzali shava, meaning in the first Mishnah it said that if the Shomer chooses to pay and not to take the oath, so then the Shomer is entitled to collect the kefel. And Rabbi Yossi has a similar argument there as the argument that he has in our Mishnah, and he argues as follows: how can this person put into the wallet of this person this kefel payment, and it's not going to go to the original owner, it's going to go to the shomer instead of the original owner? Rather, Rabbi Yossi says the kefel should go to the original owner. That's similar to Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, because Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah is saying, how can the shoel pay the value of the cow to the socher and not to the original owner? How is the socher making money on a para, on a cow that doesn't belong to him? It's a similar idea. Rabbi Yossi argues also in the first Mishnah, he says the kefel should not go to the shomer, rather the kefel should go to the original owner. And so Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda continues this question, if he argues even in that first Mishnah, halacha kemoso or ain't halacha kemoso, is the halacha like Rabbi Yossi, or is the halacha not like Rabbi Yossi? Amar Lei said to him, cholok hayer Rabbi Yossi af barishona. Rabbi Yossi does in fact disagree in the first Mishnah, v'halacha kemoso af barishona, and the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi in the first Mishnah as well. Itmar Nami was stated also, Amar Rabbi Elazar says, cholok hayer Rabbi Yossi af barishona. Rabbi Yossi disagrees in the first Mishnah as well, v'halacha kemoso af barishona, and the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi even in the first Mishnah. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar, but Rabbi Yochanan says, Moda hayer Rabbi Yossi barishona. Rabbi Yossi would admit in the first Mishnah, shekvar shilim, because he already paid. If the shomer already paid for the item, so then he really is entitled to the kefil, because essentially he paid for the item, he gave that money to the original owner. But the Gemara says, shilim in lo, shilim lo. That sounds like the halacha of the first Mishnah applies only if the shomer pays, but if he does not pay, then the halacha does not apply. V'yamar Reb Chia bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan, but didn't Reb Chia bar Abba say that Rabbi Yochanan said, lo shilim shilem mamish? When it says that he pays, it doesn't mean that he actually has to pay. Elakevan she'amar hareini mishalim, as long as the shomer says that I'm going to pay, afal pi shelo shilim, even though he did not yet pay, he's still entitled to the kefil. And so the Gemara says, you're right, Ema rather say it as follows: Moda hayer Rabbi Yossi admits barishona in the first case, in the first Mishnah, shekvar amar hareini mishalim, since he said, I am going to pay, so that is sufficient, and therefore the shomer is entitled to the kefil according to Rabbi Yossi. Again, this is Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of Rabbi Yossi. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Amar l'shnayim gazalti le'echad mikem moneh ve'eni yodea ezu mikem. If he says to two people, I stole from one of you 100 dinar, but I don't know which one I stole from. O aviv shel echad mikem hifked li moneh, one of your fathers deposited by me 100 dinar. Ve'eni yodea ezu, I don't know which one. No sein lazeh moneh ve'lazeh moneh. Then he gives each one 100 dinar, shahodeh mipi atzmo, because he admitted that he owes the money. Shnayim shefkidu etzel echad. Let's say two people deposit by one person. Zeh moneh ve'zeh masayim. One deposits 100 dinar, one deposits 200 dinar. Zeh omer shali masayim v'zeh omer shali masayim. This one says, I'm the one that deposited the 200, you owe me 200. The other one says, you owe me 200, I'm the one that deposited the 200. The halacha is, no sein lazeh moneh ve'lazeh moneh. He gives each one 100 dinar. V'ashar yehei munach ad sheyavo Eliyahu. And the rest, the part they're arguing about, that remains until Eliyahu and Navi comes and clarifies the matter. And the Mishnah continues, Amar Rabbi Yossi says, Imkain, if so, if that is the psak halacha, that everybody gets back their money and it's just the extra money they're arguing about, that is yehei munach ad sheyavo Eliyahu, so then my hifsed aramai, so then how did the swindler lose anything? El hakol yehei munach ad sheyavo Eliyahu. Rather, Rabbi Yossi says the entire amount of money, it should all remain until Eliyahu and Navi comes. And the Mishnah continues, V'chein shnei kelim, let's say you have two vessels. Likewise, by two vessels, echad yafa moneh ve'echad yafa elef zuz. One is worth 100 dinar and one is worth 1,000. Zeh omer yafa shali, v'zeh omer yafa shali. This one says, the nicer one is mine. The other one says, the nicer one is mine. No sin es hakatan le'echad mihen. We give the smaller vessel to one of them. Umitoch hagadol, and then from the larger vessel, from the one that's worth more money, no sin demei katan. We use that to get the value of the smaller vessel. L'sheni, we give the value also of the smaller vessel to the second person, and the rest remains until Eliyahu and Navi comes. And again, Amar Rabbi Yossi says, if so, what does the swindler lose out? Rather, the entire amount of money, it all remains, or both vessels remain, until Eliyahu and Navi comes and clarifies. And Rashi explains, Shehoda mi piatzmo, again, the first case of the Mishnah, since he admitted, so he has to give each of them a mana, hoel v'hoda mi piatzmo, since he admitted, therefore he gives them both a mana, v'gemar mefarish time amahu. The Gemara will explain what exactly that reasoning is. Ze omer masayim shali, this one says the 200 is mine, la'achar zman, keshabo litol pikdonon, meaning after some time when they come to retrieve their deposits, each one is claiming the 200. And Rabbi Yossi said, Ma'hef said Aramai, what does the swindler lose out? If that's the case, he has no reason to admit to the truth. And finally, the Mishnah said, Mitoch hagadol, then from the larger vessel, you give one of them the smaller, or the value of the smaller vessel. And Rashi explains, Yishberenu, essentially you break the larger vessel, and that in that fashion you give from the larger vessel, you give that person the smaller vessel. And the Gemara says, Alma, we see from the first case of the Mishnah, Misveika mafkinan mamona, that in a situation of doubt, we will take away money from the person. Again, that's the first case of the Mishnah, where the person says, I know I stole from one of you, but I don't know which one of you I stole from. And so we say he has to pay both of them. We don't say that the money stays in the possession of its owner. Urimini, now we have a contradiction from the Mishnah itself, because the Mishnah goes on to say, if two people deposit by one person, zem monev zem masayim, this one 100 dinar, this one 200 dinar, zeh omer shalim this one says the 200 is mine, the other one says the 200 is mine. No saying lazem money velazem money. You give each person a money, v'hashar yehemunach atshiyavo elio, and the rest is yehemunach. You don't say misveika. You don't say it's a situation of doubt, and therefore he has to pay 200 to both. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Lei said to him, Pikadon agezel karamis. Are you asking a contradiction from a case of Pikadon, of a deposit case, to the first case of the Mishnah, which is a case of stealing, which is a case of gezel? Gezel da'avad isur, in the case of gezel, where he's essentially saying he violated an isur, he stole money, so kansuhu rabbanon, so there the rabbanon impose a fine on him, and they say he has to pay both parties. But Pikadon, by the case of a deposit, the lo avad isura, where he did not violate a prohibition, lo kansuhu rabbanon, so the rabbanon don't impose a fine. But the Gemara still says, V'rami pikadon ha-pikadon, V'rami gezel ha-gezel. We could still have a contradiction of two cases of deposit, one on the other, and we can have a contradiction of two cases of stealing, one on the other. And the Gemara explains, pikadon ha-pikadon, we have a contradiction in terms of deposit, the katani reisha, because it also says in the reisha of the Mishnah, just like in the case where he says, I stole and I don't know who I stole from, he has to pay both of them. The same was true by the case of by the case of depositing, where he says, one of your fathers deposited by me and I don't know who, and he had to pay both of them. It says, O aviv shel echad mikam hifkid etzli moneh, if one of your fathers deposited by me 100 dinar, ve'ini odeya ezahu, I don't know which one, no sin lazem moneh v'lazem money, he has to pay each one a moneh. So here you have a case of deposit where he's paying both parties. Urimini, we have a contradiction from the Mishnah, shnayim she'efkidu v'chulu. Again, if two people deposit by him, he doesn't know which one is 200, he doesn't give both of them 200, so it's a contradiction within pikadon. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Rava says, Reisha nasa kemi she'efkidu lo b'shnei krichos. In the Reisha, it's as if the deposit was made in two separate bundles. The Havalei Lamedak, meaning the person should have been careful in that situation, whereas the end case of the Mishnah, the later case of the Mishnah, Nasa Kamisha Fkido Lo B'Krach Echad, it's as if the deposit was made in one bundle, to Lo Havalei Lamedak, where it's really not upon the person to be discerning and to figure out who gave him the 200. And the idea is as follows, Kigon de Afkidu Tarvayu Bahade Hadadi Bechad Zimna. The case of the Seifa is where both of the parties deposited by the person together at one time. They both came at one time. One gave 100, one gave 200. So he says to them, you yourselves are not makbid on one another. You seem to trust each other. So therefore I should be makbid. I have to pay attention to who gave me 200, who gave me 100. Meaning essentially what the Gemara is answering is, if the two people come in at the same time, that's what it means to say krach echad. They come in, it's so to speak, in one bundle. If they come at the same time, then they really trust each other. The person doesn't think he needs to be responsible to figure out which one gave 200, which one gave 100, because they're doing it together. They know which one gave 200 and which one gave 100. Now, that's not true in the case where he says one of your fathers gave me a deposit. There, he really needed to keep track who he owed the money to. And Rashi explains, Misveika mafkinon mamona, we see from the beginning of the Mishnah that in a situation of doubt, we take the person's money. The Katani notes in lazem moneh, it says he has to give each one a money. We don't say that when this person is claiming the money and the other one's saying, I don't know who I stole from, I don't know if it's yours, if it's your friends, we don't say uki mamona bechezkas nitva. We don't say that the money stays where it is. We don't say that he shouldn't lose the money and we should say yehemunach, that it should remain in place place until Eliyahu Navi comes. We don't say that. We say that he has to pay both parties. And then the Gemara said, Reisha dechad gavra hifkid etzlo. The Gemara made a distinction between the Reisha and the Seif of the Mishnah in terms of the case of the father depositing, or the case where we don't know who did 200, who did 100. So in the Reisha where it was one person, that would be the equivalent of two people depositing, but two separate bundles. Meaning this one deposited, not in front of the other one. In that case, certainly the Havale Lamedek, he's responsible to know mi hifkid etzlo manu, mi masayim, who gave him 100, who gave him 200. But in the end case of the Mishnah, so over there it's different. Sheifkidu lo shneim zeh b'fnei zeh. There they deposited it in front of each other. Havale kamishana emonim zelzeh. It's as if they trust each other. Lahafkid shnei pikdonosim b'tzror echad, as if they're putting it all in one bundle. The leslei lameidak, this guy doesn't need to check ma yesh lazeh b'sochu, ma yesh lachaver, what exactly belongs to this person in the bundle and what belongs to that person. V'avagav the lo krach echad have. Now, even though in this case it's not actually one bundle, miu nevertheless kevan sheifkidu zeh b'fnei zeh. But if they're doing it one in front of the other, it's clear that they don't suspect one another. They're not worried that the guy who gave 200 is not worried that the other one's going to claim the 200, etc. And the Gemara continues, V'rami gezel ha-gezel, we have a contradiction in terms of gezel, in terms of stealing. Katani hacha, it says over here in our Mishnah, Amar l'shnayim gazalti lechan mikem mana, if he says to two people, I stole from one of you 100 dinar, ve'eni yodei eze mikem, I don't know which one I stole from, o avishal lechan mikem hifkid li mana, one of your fathers deposited by me 100 dinar, ve'eni yodei eze, who I don't know which one, no sin lazem mana v'lazem mana. Again, it says you pay each one 100 dinar. Or in a minute, we have a contradiction. This is from a Mishnah in Yavamas, gazal lechan mechamish, if one person steals from 5 people, ve'enu yodei is a man Gazel, he doesn't know who he stole from. Ze Omer Osi Gazel, this one says stole from me. Ze Omer Osi Gazel, the other one says he stole from me. So there the halach is Meniach Gezela Beineim. He takes what was stolen, he places it between them. Umistalik, and then he leaves it in that fashion. Divrei Rabbi Tarfon, that's the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon. Alma misfeka lo mafkin and mamona. We see from that case that in a situation of doubt, we don't take away the person's money. We don't make him pay every single person. Ve'amrin on ukim mamona becheskas mari. Rather, what we say is that the money stays in the possession of its original owner. And the Gemara continues, now how do you know that our Mishnah follows Rabbi Tarfon? Maybe the answer simply is that Mishnah in Yavamas follows Rabbi Tarfon and our Mishnah does not. And the Gemara says, the Katani Allah, because it says on the Mishnah, that the Katani Allah dahi mod Rabbi Tarfon. It says on that Mishnah that Rabbi Tarfon would admit, if a person says to two people that I stole from one of you 100 dinar, and I don't know which one, it says that he gives this one a money and this one a money, and so therefore you see that Rabbi Tarfon agrees with our Mishnah. And the Gemara says, Hasam over there, the Katavi lay over there, they're claiming from him. Hacha, but over here, he just wants to be Yotzei, his heavenly obligations. Meaning to say, if they're claiming the money, they can't make him pay every single party. He doesn't have to pay every single party. But if he wants to fulfill his heavenly obligations, that's what our Mishnah is saying, then he has to pay every single party. And the Gemara says, Dekonami, the Gemara says you can infer this from our Mishnah as well, Dekatani shahodami piatzmo, because our Mishnah says, because he admitted, therefore he should pay all parties. That's exactly the idea. Because he's admitting, clearly he's trying to fulfill his heavenly obligations. That's why he pays all parties, and the Gemara says, Shma mina, indeed you see that this is the case. And Rashi explains, Umas nisan dohacha mimaid Rabbi Tarfon. How do you know that our Mishnah over here is Rabbi Tarfon? The tikshi loch, that you're asking this question, contradiction between our Mishnah and the Mishnah in Yavamas. Dilma Rabbi Akiva, maybe our Mishnah is actually Rabbi Akiva. The polignami bahi, he actually argues on Rabbi Tarfon in that Mishnah in Yavamas. V'omer lozu aderech, he says this is not the proper way, motziosum idei avera, that you take him out of the avera. Achi shalim gezela l'chalechad v'yechad. Rabbi Akiva, on the contrary, says he has to pay the stolen object to each party, and that does seem consistent with our Mishnah. Maybe our Mishnah is simply not Rabbi Tarfon, it's Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara says, no, the Katani Allah dahi, because on that Mishnah in Yavamas, there's a brisa which says that Rabbi Tarfon admits that you have to pay each party. Alma mod Rabbi Tarfon bahas. So you see that Rabbi Tarfon admits in our Mishnah. Umayishna, so what's the difference between the two cases? How come you have one case where Rabbi Tarfon is saying you place the gazela before them and the person's mistalik, the person leaves and he lets them argue about it. And on the other hand, Rabbi Tarfon also makes a comment that you pay each party. Umeshaninan, and the Gemara answers, Hasam de Katavoy lay. The difference is if they're claiming from him, v'hu ein chafetz litin. Let's say they're claiming from him and he doesn't want to give them elamin hadin. He wants to just follow the letter of the law. Umisveika leslan l'chiyuve l'chol chad v'chad. So if it's a situation of doubt, he doesn't have to pay each person. But hacha, but over here, meaning in our Mishnah, bebol lotzeis yidei shamayim, he's trying to fulfill his heavenly obligations. May elov boli molech mayas. He's asking what he should do. V'lo yonish, he doesn't want to be punished. Dahash davade amin yidei shamayim lo yatzah. So there we say you're not going to fulfill your heavenly obligations until unless you pay both of them. Shemtei munachas ad sheyavo Eliyahu, because if you're just going to let it remain until Eliyahu Hanavi comes, nimtza shahanigzal ma'afsid al yadcha, the person who was stolen from is going to lose because of you. And the Gemara said, Dekanami, we can see it from the language of our Mishnah as well. The time of the Masechet b'bal lotzis yidei shamayim. It's clear that the reason of our Mishnah is because he's trying to fulfill his heavenly obligations. Min ha'onesh v'lo min hadin, is trying to avoid punishment. Midatali taima behoda mipiatzmo shelo haya adam tovo klum mashma shu bali molech. From the fact that the reason given is that because he admitted, the idea is no one's really claiming from him. He's coming to decide what he should do, and if he's asking what he should do, he really should pay both parties. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said above, Hasam de Katavoy Le, over there the case is where they're claiming from him. And so the Gemara asks, V'halom matoin, well, if the case in Yavamas is that they're claiming from him, what is his counterclaim? Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Yehuda says that Rav says Halo Shosek. His counterclaim is nothing. He's essentially silent. Rav Masna Amar Rav Masna says that Rav says Halo, his counterclaim is, as the Gemara will say, he's going to be protesting. Rashi explains, V'halom matoin l'chol echad de katani meniach gezela b'neim mistalik. It says that he places the gzela among them, and then he removes himself. Of what's his claim? What's his counterclaim to each individual over there? We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis.